Cambodia is a country that is overlooked in modern society, yet has a rich history and deals with European rulers, civil wars, and genocides. French Indochina consisted of Annam, Cambodia, Tonkin, Quang Trawan, and Laos. Today, these make up the countries of Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. Colonized in the late 19th century by France, French Indochina was at great value to the French as the countries inside provided valuable resources. These resources included rubber, salt, pepper, rice, alcohol, and many others. France also tapped into the natural resources in the region. These included materials such as zinc, coal, and tin. Some places provided more resources than others. However, all countries that made up French Indochina offered materials seen as valuable to the French. They designated the area as Colonie d'Exploitation, or in more polite English translation, a colony of economic interests. In World War II, France was invaded by Germany. Germany, being allies with Japan, decided to give France's Indochina to Japan. Civilians in Indochina knew they'd be taken advantage of. They resorted to creating guerrilla warfare groups to disrupt the Japanese. These groups often followed the communist movement. At the end of World War II, France wanted its colonies back. However, the people inside the colonies wanted independence. This led to the First Indochina War and later the Vietnam War. Shortly after World War II, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos gained independence from France. They were no longer under the control of a European country and had to create their own governments again. This process took especially long for Vietnam, as they had to fight for 20 years to shape their country into what they wanted. Cambodia gained independence on November 9th, 1953. Independence is credited to a man named Norodom Sihanouk. Norodom Sihanouk was born on October 31st, 1922. He became king in 1941 when his grandfather died, and secured Cambodia's independence. He ran the country like a typical dictator, taking money and suppressing the people's voices. He ran the government as a neutral party and relied on his own popularity to keep the parties in check. This type of rule kept Cambodia on an unstable balance of peace for 15 years. Cambodia was doing relatively well compared to other Asian countries. However, in 1970, the peace and prosperity ended when the Khmer Rouge took over. When Cambodia was taken hold of by the Khmer Rouge, Sihanouk fled to Beijing. He stayed there and was recognized as the leader of Cambodia by China, North Korea, and North Vietnam. He returned to Cambodia in 1975, only to be put under house arrest until 1979. Later on, he was elected president in 1991. Monarchy was restored to Cambodia shortly after, and a coup left him on the throne in 1997. In 1970, Sihanouk had left Cambodia to go to the USSR. While there, a plan was made for him to be voted out of throne, which is why he ruled in exile in China. The man who took over Cambodia was called Lon Nol. Lon Nol was popular with the people. He took over the government and went to Phnom Penh, the capital. He didn't like the communists and told the citizens he would rid the country of the North Vietnamese, who were allies of the former Cambodian ruling party. This got Cambodia involved in the Vietnam War, as they had stayed neutral beforehand. Cambodia tried to attack the Vietnamese, but got demolished, which led them to hold defensive positions. A treaty signed in Paris, a ceasefire, was ignored by Cambodian communists in the country. They continued to attack and were ultimately bombed by the US to halt their attacks. By 1973, Lô Nol's government had the capital, Phnom Penh, and a few outside towns. Their government had been receiving aid from the US, however by 1975 his government had fallen to communist Cambodians. Many of the residents of Phnom Penh were forced out of the city and had to find new homes. After the Civil War, the Communist Party which was victorious was called the Communist Party of Kampuchea. The party had renamed the country to Kampuchea. They also had gotten rid of money and privately owned businesses, infrastructure, and places of worship. They closed the borders, entry and exit, and made everyone wear peasant clothing. This all happened in only 6 months. Pol Pot, or Saloth Sar, was born on May 19th, 1928. In his early life, he was a school teacher. However, he lived a double life, a school teacher in the day and an avid communist by night. A party he and his friends founded, the Workers' Party of Kampuchea, attacked Lô Nol's forces, and Pol Pot slowly climbed the ranks in his party. Becoming Secretary General in 1963, he quietly took power and changed the name of his party to the Communist Party of Kampuchea. Pol Pot is most famous for the horrible acts he committed. Namely, he killed between 1 to 2 million Cambodians and killed any of his political rivals, as well as his own communists. He was quoted calling people he killed old dandruff. He held food, forced work, and didn't provide basic services for his own citizens. Eastern Zone leaders in Cambodia revolted against Pol Pot. In 1979, Pol Pot and members of his party fled the capital. They stayed in underground strongholds and continued operations there. He still had around 30,000 soldiers, which he sent to attack Vietnamese. Vietnam held power in the 1980s and placed a temporary leader, Heng Samrim. The search for Pol Pot would drag on for years. Finally, in 1997, he was captured by his own forces. Over the years, his forces and power had fractured, and many separate forces chose to do their own thing. He was sentenced to life in prison and died in 1998 in his sleep due to heart failure. Modern-day Cambodia is still coping with their rough history, which was only 2 decades ago. 20% of the population had been wiped out, most being educated, leaving a relatively young and uneducated population behind. The future seems bright for Cambodia, and it may turn into a prosperous country like many of its neighbors.